an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Sabriel, chapters 15 through 18. In these chapters, we come across a village that has been devastated by yet another destruction of a Charterstone, and then we find out what it was that Touchstone did that he regrets so much. Turns out it's not quite as bad as I expected, to be honest. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Natasha. So yeah, this was a packed section, guys. First of all, I need to mention that the Mordekin is fucking back, which I should have known it would be, to be honest. But I guess I just hoped that she'd have lost it, till the end of the book, and then at the very end it would suddenly, reappear. I've been tracking you the whole time. But it's just right behind her. And I'm concerned that it's got some sort, how does it know where she is my question. Because it feels like she's in a pretty unlikely spot when it finds her. And did it drop a GPS tracking device in the cuff of her pant leg or something? Are we going to have to pull a Will Smith in Enemy of the State? Is that the name of the one? Anyway, he gets, stripped down to his boxers because he keeps finding tracking devices in his clothes. I imagine that there's some sort of magic to it, being able to figure out exactly where she is. But I just don't care for it. I'm just going to say it. I don't like that it can do this. And I'm worried that they take this trip across the sea in order to put some distance between them and it can't track them across it. But I'm worried that it's not going to matter. And that it's going to be at this fucking city when she gets out of the boat. Which is waiting for her. So I guess we'll see. Alright, so let's start with chapter 15. It's kind of sad, honestly, because chapter 15, they've decided that they're going to spend one more day just kind of hanging out and letting Sabriel recover from all of her injuries. And it's a really lonely half a chapter where everybody is just, not really talking to each other. Every time she interacts with Touchstone, he just irritates her because he insists on continuing to call her Milady with his fedora. And he just seems like he's sort of, I don't know. I really wish that he would be, and he starts to chill a little bit later, but it seems like he's being very self-indulgent about all of the regret that he has, and is sort of putting that on her in a way that I'm like, dude, she needs your help. How about you stop sort of feeling sorry for yourself and wallowing in your personal regret about a thing and just be a person and help her out with what she's going through? Because clearly, look at her face. Look at her life. And just, help a sister out is what I'm saying. But eventually he starts to come back to himself. It's just and this is where I come from all the time, is that it doesn't feel like he comes back to himself because he realizes that he's being self-indulgent. It seems more like he gets distracted enough by what's going on that he forgets to keep up this charade of false, what's the word I want? False, I was going to say humility, but that's not even quite, subservience, I guess, is the one. So yeah, it's almost like he just kind of gets distracted out of continuing to sustain that, because faking this subservience takes a lot of energy. And when his energy is being used for other things, he doesn't really remember to put forth the extra oomph to keep that going. So for me, as much as I appreciate that his attitude starts to improve and he starts to be less of a drag, part of me is like, no, but you need to understand that you were being shitty. And I don't feel like you quite get it. And this is something that I really struggle with as a person, because sometimes somebody's changing their behavior when their behavior was shitty should just be enough. Sometimes somebody has improved as a person, and whether or not they reflect a long time on why what they did before was no good should not strictly be relevant. Just let them be better and accept that that's an improvement and that's good for everybody and whatever. But I always want to know that they know how they fucked up, because there's a part of me that worries you're just going to do it again. If you don't get what you did wrong in the first place, you aren't going to be able to avoid doing this again in the future. This could just be a fluke that you seem to have improved. But the whole thing is that he's wallowing in upset over him fucking something up. And here I am being like, I'm glad that you've stopped wallowing about how you fucked that thing up, but I would like for you to wallow in how you fucked up by wallowing, please. Just kind of, I'm not really being generous or kind in this, and it's not reasonable, but I just, I think what it comes down to is that men in particular seem to really lack a sense of shame that women tend to experience all the time. And I just want to see men be ashamed sometimes and recognize that, because we feel shame over things that aren't even valid for us to be shamed about. And they can go out here and do all kinds of insane shit and then not feel any sort of shame about it. And I just part of me hates it and part of me's jealous. How do you get to live like that? I want that. That's super unfair. Abbey says, I cut Touchstone a bit of slack because this awful thing happened and then he was asleep for 200 years and now here he is, but he is annoying. Yeah, and I have to keep that in mind too, although it didn't seem like 200 years to him. So that's the other thing where I'm just kind of you don't even, if that was supposed to be punishment, it doesn't seem like it was that terrible. But maybe it was terrible. Maybe the punishment isn't the act of being in prison for 200 years. Maybe it's the waking up and realizing everything that went wrong because you suck. And you have to see the long-term consequences. And that's kind of rad. Don't you wish that some of the asshole organizers of the Industrial Revolution were forced to see what they had done to the planet now? Because I don't know that would inspire any of them to change what they actually do. It doesn't seem like a lot of people in power really seem to care about the health of a planet they won't be alive long enough to worry about. It just comes down to, I'll be dead, so who cares? And so, but part of me hopes that maybe we could put them to sleep for 200 years and wake them up now and have them just be horrified at what's happening. But anyway, I digress. So this whole thing with them hanging out and spending a day resting is so awkward because they all are just so distant from one another. She's trying to read, but she keeps getting weirdly distracted. The food that they have isn't awesome, and everything just sort of feels like a strain. And when she wakes up at one point in the middle of the night, Touchstone has started up the fire again and is sitting next to it. And she asks if he's all right, and he didn't realize she was awake, and he falls over because he's so startled. As somebody, guys, confession time. Here comes some shame. I used to be somebody who loved to startle people. I was that person at work who would just sneak up on you because I was bored and it was fun and whatever. But I am now a person who hates to be startled so much that if I worked with me from 10 years ago, I would have slapped me in the face. I really think that's my instinct. If somebody startled me, I had somebody in college try and startle me, and I spun and whapped him across the face before I even realized what I was doing. And I didn't do it that hard. I pulled back just in time, but not enough. And everybody sort of just started laughing because my reaction was so immediate. But yeah, just occasionally Owen will kind of do something abrupt that sends my heart rate through the fucking roof. So yeah, he almost falls over, and then he's like, I'm sorry, I just started to remember stuff. And I really wish that I hadn't. And he finally tells her to just go back to sleep. I'll wake you up. And he calls her Milady. And she goes back to sleep and is woken up instead by Mogget. And Touchstone is making the porridge for breakfast. And then they head out through this walkway that's really hidden. It looks like it's just this stone, basically. And I love the fact that he offers to carry her pack. And she's like, no, this is mine. I'll carry it. It's fine. Thanks. But then just a little ways on, she realizes that she's still pretty weak. And this shit is heavy as fuck. And maybe I should have just let him do that. And finally, it's like, all right, how about we switch in and out for carrying this, actually. And I liked that she actually, instead of just suffering through it, which Abby's saying this is exactly what I would do. I mean, Abby, I would totally not cave and be like, maybe we should switch off. My pride at having made a point of being like, no, that's mine, I'll carry it. I couldn't back down. I would be like, no, it's fine. Even though I'm literally stooped. I can be so petty about stuff like that. I just really, it's not a good trait. So the fact that she stops and kind of reevaluates the situation, I admire that she has the will to do that and just admit, all right, I was a little hasty because I just don't have it in me. I'm such a brat. I swear to God. So, and then he steps in front of her because they're about to go through this walkway. And he stops her and says, no, there are guardians on this stair. I know the words and signs to pass them. You're the Abhorsen, so they might let you pass, but I'm not sure. Is this stair the one you mentioned when you said the queen was ambushed? No, that stair was in Belissaire. So we find out about what that is later, but I won't get into that quite yet. And as they walk through, he keeps on doing some different spells and mutterings to dispel magic. And she's really startled a couple times at how subtle a lot of the magic is and how difficult to detect it is. And realizes that she might have walked into a bunch of traps here and not ever have realized. And the fact that it's so subtle makes it all the more, what's the word? It just insidious and deadly. So yeah, I really enjoyed this moment of him proving to her that he knows what he's doing, even though it seems that it still hasn't quite sunk in for her, not until later, that he's as good at magic as she is. She keeps thinking he's just some fighter who knows how to get down here specifically. I think that's what she really believes, is that he can dispel these particular wards and charms and whatnot because he's familiar with this place in particular. And it doesn't occur to her that maybe he just knows what he's doing. And finally they come out. And this moment, how does it open? Asked Sabriel, indicating the door. She couldn't see any handle, lock, or key, or any hinges for that matter. Touchstone was silent, eyes unfocused and staring, and then he laughed, a bitter little chuckle. I don't remember. All the way up the stair, all the words and signals, and now useless, Useless. At least you got us up the steps, Sabriel pointed out, alarmed by the violence of his self-loathing. I'd still be sitting by the spring watching it bubble if you hadn't come along. You would have found the way out, Touchstone muttered. Or Mogget would. Would. Yes, that's what I deserve to be. Touchstone, shut up. You're to be useful, remember? Mogget interrupted, hissing. Yes, replied Touchstone, visibly calming his breathing, composing his face. I'm sorry, Mogget, milady. This moment, and she finally again is like, can you not call me that? I've said this already. Just call me Sabriel. And he says, it's a habit, or it reminds me of my place in the world. It's easier for me. I don't care what's easier for you, Sabriel snapped. Don't call me milady and stop acting like a half-wit. Just be yourself. Behave normally. I don't need a valet. I need a useful friend. Very well, Sabriel, Touchstone said with careful emphasis. He was angry now, but at least that was an improvement over servile, Sabriel thought. So yeah, I like this moment of them finally kind of having it out. And yeah, he's mad, but you know what? Whatever. Get over it. So they walk through this door. They finally manage to push it open altogether with their combined effort. And the doors were open. They walked through, shielding their eyes against the sun, feeling the cool breeze sharp on their skin, the fresh scent of pine trees clearing their nostrils of underground dust. I can hear voices, exclaimed Sabriel at the same time, because Touchstone just said, it feels strange. I can see time, whispered Mogget. They stood in a small clearing in the middle of a pine forest, or plantation, for the trees were regularly spaced. The doors behind them stood in the side of a low hillock of turf and stunted bushes. Pine needles lay thick on the ground, pine cones peeking through every few paces like skulls ploughed up on some ancient battleground. The watchwood, said Touchstone. It's winter, I think, or early spring? So, would one of you care to tell me something I really want to know? Like, what are the great charters? I can't, Mogget and Touchstone said together. Then Touchstone continued, haltingly. There is a spell, a binding on us. But someone who is not a charter mage, or otherwise closely bound to the charter, might be able to speak. A child, perhaps, baptized with the charter mark but not grown into power. You're cleverer than I thought, commented Mogget. Not that that's saying much. A child, said Sabriel. Why would a child know? If you'd had a proper education, you'd know too, said Mogget. A waste of good silver, that school of yours. Perhaps, agreed Sabriel. But now that I know more of the old kingdom, I suspect being at school in Ansel Stieri saved my life. But enough of that. Which way do we go now? So, they head down this track towards this town, which is a little bit less than a mile away when they finally spot it. It's a village, really, more than a town. And Touchstone notices that the fields were flooded. And when Sabriel looks, she had, kind of out of the corner of her eye, seen the fields, and there was, a kind of graze of color over them that she had thought was the plants growing. But it turns out to be water. And they're realizing that there are no people that they can see in the village. And all of these pumps that they used to, pump water in and out, to work with the wind, they have all stopped, even though they were powered magically with a charter spell. And Sabriel's like, motherfucker, this village is dead. Something happened to the stone. I can tell. And sure enough, they finally get to this little town. They have to wade through all this water because everything is flooded. and they finally come across the body of a middle-aged woman who Mogget says was the healer for the town, who had her throat slit in order to break the stone. Half the stone had been sheared away, pieces broken and tumbled, dark stone on green turf. A body lay in front of the stone, hands and feet bound, the gaping cut across the throat a clear sign of where the blood had come from, the blood for the sacrifice that broke the stone. Sabriel knelt by the corpse, eyes averted from the broken stone. It was only recently ruined, she felt, but already the door to death was creaking open. She could almost feel the cold of the currents beyond, leaking out around the stone, sucking warmth and life from the air. Things lurked there, too, she knew, just beyond the border. She sensed their hunger for life, their impatience for night to fall. That is so creepy. Can I just say, and I know that I've been this whole time talking about how creepy so many of the creatures in this book are, but the fact that death is not even close to the end of things for everybody in these stories is just very upsetting. Death is the best you can hope for, really, because there are a lot of alternatives to just outright dying. And the fact that there is a village that has been razed to the ground, and that's bad enough, but then they're like, oh, and we also have to get out of here before the sun goes down, because guess what? There's shit here now that, is probably being controlled by whoever did this, or if not being controlled, then they're just running amok. I don't like this. It just changes everything. It's like a zombie movie, but so much worse, because it's like zombies aren't intelligent. Zombies, I guess depending on what kind of, but if we go by the most commonly held mythology for zombies, they're not intelligent. They're just sort of like these mindless droning. And I have a hard time being afraid of creatures like that unless we have sheer numbers. But in this, there are such a variety of beings. We've got bodies that are taken over by another spirit, either dead bodies or later, as we see, live bodies. We have skeleton creatures. We have creatures that are made of living flame, but black flame somehow. We have creatures that are supposed to actually live in death that kind of cross over, which doesn't seem fair. There's just a lot of different varieties of nightmare that we can encounter here. And it's a little overwhelming. So they're looking through, trying to find out where they should go next. And she starts to realize that there's a little cache of people, the last few survivors, because later on we find out that there had been 150 people in this village, and now there are 30, and they have crossed over the water onto this little island to just try and survive. But the thing is, we've seen how these creatures can make bridges with grave dirt, and it's a pain in the ass, but they can do it. So the longer these folks are out here, the greater the likelihood that they're going to wind up being attacked. And, I almost forgot. She wants to burn the body of the healer. I'm going to read this. She stood back and drew the charter marks for the funeral pyre above the corpse, whispering the names of the marks as she did so. But her fingers fumbled, and words went awry. The baleful influence of the broken stone pressed against her like a wrestler gripping her wrists, clamping her jaw. Sweat beaded on her forehead, and pain shot through her limbs, her hands shaking with effort, tongue clumsy, seeming swollen in her suddenly dry mouth. Then she felt assistance come, strength flowing through her, reinforcing the marks, steadying her hands, clearing her voice. She completed the litany, and a spark exploded above the woman, became a twisting flame, then grew to a fierce, white-hot blaze that spread the length of the woman's body, totally consuming it, to leave only ash, light cargo for the sea winds. The extra strength came through Touchstone's hand, his open palm lightly resting on her shoulder. As she straightened up, the touch was lost. When Sabriel turned around, Touchstone was just drawing his right-hand sword, eye fixed on the houses, as if he'd had nothing to do with helping her. "Thank you," said Sabriel. Touchstone was a strong charter mage, perhaps as strong as she was. This surprised her, though she couldn't think why. He'd made no secret of being a charter mage. She just assumed he would only know a few of the more fighting-related marks and spells, petty magics. So, Touchstone's got some hidden depths. I like it. So they head towards this island, and it's really kind of funny because Sabriel is... It's not like she's it's not that she's incompetent or anything. It's just that there's a lot about the traditions on this side of the wall that she doesn't know of or stop to think about. And Touchstone does know them and also is aware, and granted, like, his information is 200 years out of date. So he steps in a couple times, and I kind of wanted somebody to be like, that's really old-fashioned. Nobody says that anymore. What is wrong with you? But he announces her because they're, like, coming towards the edge of this island, and there are some people who are set to watch, and they send some arrows their way. And the reaction that they have was that there's like, I mean, it's understandable that they have people watching, but when Touchstone actually talks to somebody, he's like, is this the way you greet people? And I really love, that's what I mean when I talk about guys not having like shame. Not that this is like a particularly good example, but it's just a little thing like me coming across this like island where there's a bunch of people out here waiting for something to come and hurt them, and they fire an arrow because they don't know me and they don't know what I'm about. I'm not taking that personally. In fact, I'm going to apologize to them for startling them and being like a potential threat, even though I know I'm not. They have no reason to know that. But instead, he's the one who's like on the offense here. Our arrows, you're welcome for such folk as we? Like, how fucking dare you? And that's the way you should react in this sort of situation, because you want to get the upper hand, and making the other party defensive is a good way to do that. But that is not my instinct at all. So this old man finally says, because she interrupts Touchstone and whispers to him, "What makes you think you can speak for me? Wouldn't a friendly approach be better? And since when are you my sworn..." And then she stops because the elder who they're talking to interrupts. And there's this really awkward moment where he's like, "Oh yeah, all of this shit happened. A bunch of our people are dead. Strangers are frightening to us." And she says that she's the Abhorsen, and he says, "Yes, I remember the coat you're wearing and that there was a sword." And he pauses, and Sabriel just stands there, waiting for him to keep talking until Touchstone's like, "He wants to see the sword." And she's like, oh, and like kind of blushes because it's so obvious. Sabriel, girl, come on. I was just like, what are you doing? So this dude invites them over once he realizes that she really is the Abhorsen, and like yells to the other people on the island, "Help at last!" And she sort of like kind of exchanges a look with Touchstone like, help at last. I hope so, but I guess we'll see. And he says to her as this guy's walking away, "It is traditional for someone of high rank such as yourself to be announced by their sworn swordsman, and the only acceptable way for me to travel with you is as your sworn swordsman. Otherwise, people will assume that we are, at best, illicit lovers. Having your name coupled to mine in such a guise would lower you in most eyes. You see?" "Ah," replied Sabriel, gulping, feeling the flush of embarrassment come back. So, yeah. Let's see, where is it? Oh, right here. Okay, so they cross over and they meet all of the remaining villagers, who tell her that there had been 32 of them, but this morning they found somebody who had been sucked dry like a husk. "We think one of them's here," said a woman, her voice long gone beyond fear to fatalism. She stood alone, accompanied by the clear space of tragedy. Sabriel guessed that she had lost her family. Husband, children, perhaps parents and siblings too, for she wasn't over 40. "It'll take us one by one," the woman continued, matter of fact, her voice filling the shed with dire certainty. Around her, people shuffled, twitchily, not looking at her, as if to meet her gaze would be to accept her words. Most looked at Sabriel, and she saw hope in their eyes. Not blind faith or complete confidence, but a gambler's hope that a new horse might change a run of losses. So, she tells them, "I can do what I can here, but as far as like the mainland village, that shit's basically gone. I'm already tracking down whoever is, because there's like some mastermind at work here who's affecting everybody, and I'm going to try and track them down and defeat them. And when that's done, I'll come back, and hopefully we will be able to restore the Charterstone and get this all set. But for right now, all I can do is focus on what's going on right here on this island." And Touchstone is the one who says, "You'll have to keep watching the breakwater. The dead or their living slaves may try to fill it with stones or push across a bridge. They can cross running water by building bridges of boxed grave dirt." So Touchstone is fully aware of the tactic that Sabriel had been unaware of, that she had to face last, 3 or 4 episodes ago. So when one of them asks, "How are you going to find this dead thing that's already on the island?" And Sabriel immediately puts out some feelers and finds the person right away. But she can't let on that she knows who it is already. But she does know. It was there, a faint, concealed emanation, like an untraceable whiff of something rotten. Sabriel concentrated on it, followed it, and found it right there in the shed. The dead was somehow hiding among the villagers. She opened her eyes slowly, looking straight at the point where her senses told her the dead creature lurked. She saw a fisherman, middle-aged, his salt-etched face red under sun-bleached hair. He seemed no different than the others around him, listening intently for her reply, but there was definitely something dead in him, or very close by. He was wearing a boat cloak, which seemed odd, since the smoking shed was hot from massed humanity and the many lights. "Tell me," Sabriel said, "did anyone bring a large box with them out to the island? Something, say, an arm span wide or larger? It would be heavy, with grave dirt." So, as they start talking amongst themselves, there's one dude who starts to be like, "I'm pretty sure that you had a box like that, Patar." So, let's talk about this moment where she describes mentally, like she's thinking about what this thing looks like. This is so gross. Closer now, Sabriel was sure that the fisherman was a vassal of the dead. Technically, he was still alive, but a dead spirit had suppressed his will, riding on his flesh like some shadowy string puller, using his body as a puppet. Something highly unpleasant would be half submerged in his back, under the boat cloak. Mordaught, they were called, Sabriel remembered. A whole page was devoted to these parasitical spirits in the Book of the Dead. They liked to keep a primary host alive, slipping off at night to sate their hunger from other living prey, like children. Something highly unpleasant would be half submerged in his back. Ladies and gentlemen, there goes one of the least pleasant sentences I've ever read in my life. There's something about that wording, half submerged, that's so evocative and so creepy that it just fucks me right up. I hate it. It's like it's like a Voldemort in book 1, but like worse, because Voldemort, it's like he's a partially created being that's kind of like coming to life from Quirrell's back, like sort of emerging. But there's something about something that's half submerged instead of something that's emerging that makes me think of a ringworm, or I'm trying to think of something that's like just some, like a parasite is exactly the thing, you know? It just, I hate it. I hate it so much. Like a tick, but a really big one that like gets under your skin. Nope, 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 nope. So, this motherfucker is not stupid. And he knows that she knows. And immediately sucks all of the life out of this poor dude. Patar suddenly screamed and stood rigid, the redness draining from his face to be replaced by gray. Then his flesh crumpled and fell apart, even his bones flaking away to soggy ash, as the Mordot sucked all the life out of him in one voracious instant. Newly fed and strengthened, the dead slid out from the falling cloak, a pool of squelching darkness. It took shape as it moved, becoming a large, disgustingly elongated sort of rat. Quicker than any natural rat, it scuttled towards a hole in the wall and escape. Okay, so first of all, why do all of these creatures have to be the creepiest in, like, the entire world? This is like just, and also this weird moment here in terms of how it's written. Quicker than any natural rat, it scuttled towards a hole in the wall and escape, is kind of a weird sentence, and it's ended with an exclamation point, which this book barely uses those, and it's such a strange moment to me for there to be headed towards a hole in the wall and escape. It sounds like a comic book for a second. It just really took me out of it. It just did not suit. But yeah, I'm not a fan of these friggin' creatures. All like the last one was a combination between a segmented worm and a pig, I think is what it said. Dislike. So Sabriel tries to get it with her sword, but she misses, but Touchstone doesn't. His right-hand sword sheared through the creature just behind the head, the left-wielded blade impaling its sinuous midsection. Pinned to the floor, the creature writhed and arched, its shadow stuff working away from the blaze. It was remaking its body, escaping the trap. Quickly, Sabriel stood over it, Rana sounding in her hand, sweet, lazy tone echoing out into the shed. Before the echoes died, the Mordot ceased to writhe. Form half lost by its shifting from the swords, it lay like a clump of charred liver, quivering on the floor, still impaled. I'm going to take some pills right now. Just let that sink in. I would like to repeat. It lay like a lump of charred liver, quivering on the floor, still impaled. Y'all, I'm not ready for this book, okay? This is nasty. This is nasty. Ugh, gross. Stop it. I'm going to pick the weirdest combo of creatures to make you real uncomfortable out of the gate. And then I'm going to make it a weird texture also so that it's like a piece of fucking like organ meat. And not even like cooked organ meat. It's charred. So clearly it's organ meat that got cooked wrong. and is all like burnt on the outside, but still like jello inside. And it's submerged in someone's back, and it's sucks the life out of them in like a millisecond, so that they just drop like ash to the floor, and this fucking slimy, like aspic creature comes slithering out of it. I hate it so much. I hate it. Oh, it's so gross. Oh. Okay, so I had to register my complaint. Okay, I just needed to let you all know this book is on notice. So she is about to pull out this other bell, and thinks to herself that it's stirring suspiciously under her hand. Best to wait a moment to calm herself, Sabriel thought, taking her hand away from the bandolier. She sheathed her sword and looked around the shed. That's a lot of shush. She sheathed her sword and looked around the shed. To her surprise, everyone except Touchstone and Mogget was asleep. They had only caught the echoes of Rana, which shouldn't have been enough. Of course, Rana could be tricksome too, but its trickery was far less troublesome. This is a Mordot, a weak spirit catalogued as one of the lesser dead. They like to ride with the living, cohabiting the body to some extent, directing it and slowly sipping the spirit away. It makes them hard to find. What do we do with it now? Asked Touchstone, eyeing the quivering lump of shadow with distaste. It clearly couldn't be cut up, consumed by fire, or anything else he could think of. I will banish it and send it back to die a true death, replied Sabriel. Slowly, she drew Kibith, using both hands. She still felt uneasy, for the bell was twisting in her grasp, trying to sound of its own accord, a sound that would make her walk in death. She gripped it harder and rang the orthodox backward, forward, and figure eight her father had taught her. Kibith's voice rang out, singing a merry tune, a capering jig that almost had Sabriel's feet jumping too, till she forced herself to be absolutely still. The Mordot had no such free will. For a moment, Touchstone thought it was getting away, the shadow form suddenly leaping upward, unreal flesh slipping up his blades almost to the cross hilts. Then it slid back down again and vanished. Back into death, to bob and spin in the current, howling and screaming with whatever voice it had there, all the way to the final gate. So, I'm really curious about why this bell was acting the way that it was. I'm not totally sure about how these things work, so I'll be interested to see if there's anything more that gets revealed to us about this. So she says something about how glad she is that it turns out Touchstone's blades are ensorcelled. And he's like, yeah, I thought that you knew that. But he says, legend has it that the wall maker made them at the same time he, or she, I suppose, made your sword. So finally, they wake everybody up. And they make a deal that they're going to get one of their boats and some food. And it's a bit of like, because these people only have 4 boats left. So for them to make this deal is actually kind of like tough. But finally they agree, like, all right, well, I guess we were all going to die if you didn't help us out here. But they obviously aren't keen on having to, like, that's 2/3 of the, no, that's 1/4 of the ships they've got. And that's tough. So they head out. Oh, wait, but she finds out that the Mordekin's after her first. I hate this because I just didn't expect it, you guys. They already have so much happening. I'm going to read this spot. She couldn't see anything through the rain and dark, but she could feel the dead. There were more than she had sensed earlier, or they had grown much stronger. Then, with a sickening feeling, she realized that this strength belonged to a single creature, only now emerging from death, using the broken stone as a portal. An instant later, she recognized its particular presence. The mordicant had found her. Oh, snap! Yeah, I am really... Because the mordicant came out... But, okay. Backing up. When she was at home, and by home I mean like the Abhorson's... What's the word? Domain, castle, full holdfast, estate. When she was there... And the mordicant was following her. And then she saw that there were a bunch of enslaved human beings who were building this grave dirt sort of bridge. They were not organized and directed by the mordicant, right? Because I'm just trying to remember exactly how, like, I think that there's another person that was supposed to be part of that, and the mordicant was just like an accessory, but not actually the one that was like, that had gotten all of those people together, if I'm not mistaken. I'm just trying to sort of get a sense of exactly what the mordicant is capable of and what it isn't. And I really hope that that was not him who had organized that. Because if it was, and I'm saying him just, but I don't love the idea of her being pursued by something that has the capacity to make those kinds of, like, teams of people. Yeah, I'm just concerned about that. Like, I really am. I want her to be able to focus on what she's fucking doing. That's, like, guys. I want things to be easy, is really the thing. And that's not how this is going to work out. So, okay. They get into that boat and they head out. Let's see. Reimer, have the archers keep very careful watch. Tell them to shoot anything that comes onto the breakwater. There is nothing living out there now, only the dead. We need to go back and talk to your elder. And then they make the deal and they head out. Tiredness weighed down on her tiredness and the weight of awareness of her enemies, like a darkness always clouding the edges of her vision. We will go now. My good wishes stay with you, and my hopes for your safety. May the charter preserve us all, added Touchstone, bowing to the old man. And there's a moment where, just as they're leaving, she says goodbye to this little girl who reads a poem, or who recites it. 5 great charters knit the land together, linked hand in hand. 1 in the people who wear the crown, 2 in the folk who keep the dead down. 3 and 5 became stone and mortar. 4 sees all in frozen water. Real weird. Keeping an eye on that. Because I don't really... When they say 5 great charters knit the land, I'm assuming they mean 5 great wizards, right? 1 in people who wear the crown. So that's one of them. 2 Abhorsons, basically. 3 and 5 became stone and mortar. Yeah, I don't know what this means. Back on the shore, the mordicant suddenly howled, a long, piercing cry that echoed far across the water, chilling hearts on both boat and island. Ooh, dislike. So, chapter 18. This is the last one. It's unpleasant being stuck on this ship. There's a lot of... I mean, honestly, guys, being on a ship just always has sounded like the worst to me. Going out for a day trip, that I can tolerate. That's fine. You know, I'm sure... I haven't really done that except for, like, being on a ferry, which isn't the same. But I'm sure that that's probably, like, enjoyable. But what I don't like the idea of at all is being stuck on a boat for more than, like, 2 days. And the idea of it being a boat that isn't even equipped with the things that the modern boater has come to enjoy, such as an area with running water and a bathroom. This just sounds like a probably terrible way to travel. And I just really feel for her when she's just like, I am so sick of this. And it's 5 days. 2 days from Nesto to Beardy Point. And a beach stream devoid of life, but also devoid of the dead. Here, for the first time, Sabriel could no longer sense the pursuing Mordicant. 3 days from Beardy Point to the island of Ilgard. They passed it late in the afternoon, their single sail stretched to bursting. It was half a day from Ilgard to the Bellis Mouth. There is a boom chain across the Bellis Mouth, Touchstone explained, as he raised the sail and Sabriel hauled the sea anchor in over the bow. The sun was rising behind him, but had not yet pulled itself out of the sea, so he was no more than a dim shadow in the stern. It was built to keep pirates and such like out of the Sea of Sair. You won't believe the size of it. I can't imagine how it was forged or strung across. I love this because it's really reminding me of the chain that Tyrion comes up with, which is not something that's in the show, but, you know, whatever. We don't talk about the show anymore. And apparently it was, like, really well engineered because he's sort of hoping that it's slackened a little over time and that they'll be able to sail over it without having to worry. But it turns out that shit is solid as a rock and has not lessened at all. So they wind up having to figure out a way to, like, get up right against the edge and, like, go underneath it. So he said, let's see, who decides whether to let vessels pass the chain? Already she was thinking ahead, wondering about Belissaire. Could it be like Nestau, the city abandoned, riddled with the dead? And he says, well, I mean, it could have fallen to anarchy, but it's like he doesn't really believe it. I'll just look like a necromancer, a salty, unwashed necromancer. I am sure that necromancers and worse are not uncommon sights in Belissaire. If you say so, Touchstone said at the same time. Clearly, he didn't believe the cat. Belissaire was the royal capital, a huge city, home at least to 50,000 people. Touchstone couldn't imagine it fallen, decayed, and in the hands of the dead. Despite his own inner fears and secret knowledge, he couldn't help but be confident that the Belissaire they were sailing towards would be little different from the 200-year-old images locked in his memory. That confidence took a blow as the Bellis Mouth towers became visible above the blue line of the horizon. So yeah, he really quickly is disabused of this notion. And I really rather liked it. It's kind of a human moment that he just has trouble, like, envisioning that things have changed that much. It seems like something that I would also feel, you know. And as they start to come towards it, they realize, like, they're pretty far out on the water. They've been out for a little while. And they realize that they can talk about what they haven't been able to because that spell was keeping them silent. No imagination, no thinking ahead. A flaw in your character, said Mogget sternly. Mogget, why are you so rude to Touchstone? I'm accurate, not rude, and he deserves it. I'm sick of this, announced Sabriel. Touchstone, what does Mogget know that I don't? So, Touchstone tells them a story about how he had a friend whom he did not really like as they got older. It was the prince, the son of the queen. And this guy, his name is Roger, he started to get into some weird shit as he got older. And Touchstone just basically sort of like when somebody announces that they're, a flat earther or something, you just start to be like, you know what, buddy? I think I'm going to pass on those drinks after work today. And he starts to pull back, and eventually Roger comes around again and seems to be normal and seems to have kind of left behind the weirdness of the stuff that he was into before. And I like that, because Touchstone's sort of I was glad it seemed like he was his old self again. And as much as you want to be like, oh, you sweet summer child, how could you not have seen this coming? At the same time, when you have a friend that you really liked and they start to pull away and seem to exhibit some bad beliefs, you want them to think better of it and to come back around. So it's only natural to sort of let yourself believe that's what's happening. And here he finally, Roger comes down and is like, hey, Mom, he goes to the queen. There was something, he tells her there was something amiss down at the stones. He was her son, but she did not take great account of his wisdom or believe him when he spoke of trouble. She was a charter mage and felt nothing wrong. Besides, she was winning at Krenak, so she told him to wait till morning. Roger turned to me, asked me to intercede, and charter helped me. I did. I believed Roger. I trusted him, and my belief convinced the queen. Finally, she agreed. By that time, the sun had set. With Roger, myself, 3 guards, and 2 ladies-in-waiting, we went down to the reservoir where the great stones are. There was terrible wrong down there, but it was Roger's doing, not his discovery. There are 6 great stones, and 2 were just being broken with the blood of his own sisters. I saw their last seconds, the faint hope in their clouding eyes. I felt the shock of the stones breaking, and I remember Roger stepping up behind the queen, a saw-edged dagger striking so swiftly across her throat. He had a cup, a golden cup, one of the queen's own, to catch the blood, but I was too slow. The other 2 guards were Roger's men. They attacked me, but one of the ladies-in-waiting threw herself across them. I went battle-mad and killed both guards. Roger had jumped from the barge and was wading to the stones, holding the cup. His 4 sorcerers were waiting, dark-cowled, around the 3rd stone, the next to be broken. I couldn't reach him in time. I threw my sword. It flew straight and true, taking him just above the heart. He screamed and turned toward me. You may tear this body, he said as he walked. Rip it like some poor maid costume, but I cannot die. He came within an arm's length of me, and I could only look into his face. There was blinding light, the sound of bells, and a voice, harsh voices. Roger flinched back, the cup dropped, blood floating in the water like oil. I turned and saw a burning, twisting column of white fire, a man with sword and bells. Then I fainted or was knocked unconscious. Yeah. This is pretty serious stuff. And she asks, so was that an abhorsen? And he's like, I think it probably was. And Mogget says that he was there. And it was an abhorsen. And he says, this abhorsen was a little too good-hearted to deal with treachery. I had terrible trouble getting him to Belisare, and in the end we were not timely enough to save the queen or her daughters. Roger was already one of the dead when he came back to Belisare, but only an abhorsen would have known it, and he wasn't there. Roger's real body was hidden somewhere, is hidden somewhere, and he wore a free magic construct for his physical form. That is a lot. And what it comes down to is, so Roger is Caragor. His full ceremonial name was Rogarek, which is basically Caragor backwards. And he is still trying to come out. He or his servants must have lured my father to Belissaire just before he emerged from death, Sabriel thought aloud. I wonder why he came out into life so near the wall. His body must be near the wall. He would need to be close to it. You should know that. To renew the master spell that prevents him from ever passing beyond the final gate. So that's pretty cool. And they ask he asks Touchstone, who put my body in death? And Mogget's like, I'm not really sure, but it must have been the Abhorsen. Like, that's the only thing that really makes sense. So they're in the middle of talking about this, and they all lose the capacity to speak of it because they get close to the city again, and the cleansing power of being on the ocean, like, disappears. So, damn. Yeah. Ooh, I'm over time. But that was a lot, guys. There's so much happening here. I'm really enjoying this book. So thank you very much to Abbey for commissioning this. I am just looking forward a lot to finding out what happens. I am also really glad that Touchstone seems to be competent and useful, and as much as he fucked up, it's understandable. I don't feel that mad at him, you know? I understand him being as regretful as he is, like, of course you would. But it's not his fault, you know? So, well, all right, guys, I have to go, but thank you all so much again for listening. Hope you're enjoying the coverage. Thank you to Abbey for commissioning this, and thank you for coming and hanging out in the chat also, Abbey. And yeah, I will hopefully be seeing you all again soon with a new episode. Toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.